before you conduct any kind of polling, you actually have to have a theory of change. And so we want to ask ourselves not which message garners the highest approval, which message is the most convincing, which message, and by the way, this is almost always what is tested for.
Thank you all for tuning in to The Left Hook. As promised, I have the mighty Anat Shenker-Osorio. She has come on this show several times before. I owe her a mug or a sweater for being a Left Hook, I think, four-timer. Anat is the head of ASO Communications. She does fantastic actual polling, research, testing on what messages actually resonate with the majority. And she's also the host of the Words to Win By podcast, which you'd all listen to and subscribe to. And Anat, I don't want to give too much away, but you saw the now, I guess, quasi-viral clip because Fox News wrote about it. And Fox News referred to me as left-wing podcast host, so I have no name. I am now the left-wing podcast host, but I always want to thank the right wing. For whatever reason, I think God is looking out for me because they always choose the best photos. So thank you. So they talked about the left-wing podcast host grilled Hakeem Jeffries on Abolish ICE. And interestingly enough, Anat, Mediaite, which is center-right, and Fox, which is right-wing, side with Hakeem Jeffries, which makes me think maybe that's not a good thing for Hakeem Jeffries, who refused to answer my questions about Abolish ICE. However, I want to ask you, right now, we have ICE. We have the DHS funding bill. We've seen the polling. And we've seen a multiracial, multicultural coalition coming together. We see white Trumpers coming out and saying, yeah, ICE, I don't know. But you tell me, what does the polling show? Am I an outlier in my request for Democratic leaders to at least say abolish ICE or defund ICE or, I don't know, give an explanation as to why we should be funding this masked lawless agency that is terrorizing Americans? You tell me.
Yeah. So first, and I feel completely equipped to do this because at the risk of blowing sunshine up your ass, I think the way that you conducted that interview was brilliant. I really, really commend you. And so I get to give it back to you. Ha! I'm going to challenge.
We're both not good at accepting compliments. So thank you, which is the best I can do.
So I'm going to challenge the premise of the question just for a second. It
Please.
is true that I do public opinion research. It is also true that I believe that something I've come to call pollingism is an extraordinarily sick fetish of center-left parties, not just within the United States, but outside of it. So I'm going to answer what does the polling say,
Please.
but I'm going to answer it by saying before you conduct any kind of polling, you actually have to have a theory of change. And so we want to ask ourselves not which message garners the highest approval, which message is the most convincing, which message, and by the way, this is almost always what is tested for in standard Democratic message testing. They're testing for lowering Trump disapproval. That is the dependent variable, taking you back to stats days, that they hold as sacrosanct. Part of that is due to sort of 501c3 restrictions. You know, they can't always measure vote choice. So that's what they think the name of the game is. Does message A versus B versus C lower Trump disapproval? And on the face of it, you can think, well, that sounds logical. Isn't that what we want to be doing? What I want to be doing is getting children and their caregivers and families and actually all people out of concentration camps. That is my North Star. What I want to be doing is ending the MAGA murder regime. What I want to be doing is actually liberating people from this regime of the bullies for the billionaires. So yes, I also do testing. I also am good at math. I'm testing for fundamentally different things. So I just want to first give clarity. There's polling and there's polling.
You actually stand for something. You actually stand for certain values and positions. This is what you're saying.
Right. And I don't believe that polling should drive our agenda. I
Mm,
believe that the purpose of message testing is to figure out in what way do I need to speak and repeat and communicate in order to get across and persuade and mobilize in service of what I'm attempting to get done in the world.
yeah.
That is my North Star. And so the question is really not the job of a good message isn't to say what's popular, it's to make popular what we need said.
Mm,
It turns out that even by standard criteria that we only if we wanted to confine ourselves to only be saying what is popular, it's quite obvious as you lifted up in that interview that ICE is extraordinarily unpopular. Now, here is where sort of the rub lies, right? Where the rub lies is this question around, yes, but don't people still want immigration enforcement? Aren't they still concerned about immigration enforcement? Blah, 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 blah. And how do you handle that? If you believe, as I do, that it is our physical and rhetorical task to have people understand the truth of what ICE is, which is an utterly reckless, lawless, unreformable agency. It is made out of people with a desire to enact and carry out white supremacy. Then, by definition, you have to call for it ending. I'm verb neutral, abolish, ice out, get rid of, end,
same,
whatever.
same.
I don't have a fetish around the verb. But if you communicate anything less than that, then what you are conveying is that this is an entity capable of being reformed. And that goes against your very own objective, which is to have people understand as a Democrat that what is going on is completely and totally, beyond the pale is the softest terminology I can use, is, beyond unacceptable, must be stopped immediately. And the only way to stop it is to remove power from this regime that has enabled and ballooned and given carte blanche to this Gestapo. And so by communicating anything less than that, essentially what you are saying is, well, the thing is kind of sort of okay. It just needs less money and to follow the laws that, by the way, are already on the books, which it has proven it will not follow. And so basically, you are making it clear that you actually don't have a position. And when it's clear that you don't have a position, then what is your electoral prospect? What is it that you are selling people? You need me to be in leadership in order to what?
Yes. What? That and with Hakeem Jeffries, honestly, I wasn't trying to do a gotcha. Like
Yeah.
I tried to make him make the case, right? Because if you're saying rain and ice, okay, what you're telling me is abolish ICE is untenable, or you disagree with it, or you think it's not success. At least explain it to me, right? What I say is this: Republicans, it's a cult, it's an authoritarian cult, but at least they connect to their audiences, they connect to their base. It's a feedback loop, or they sell it, right? Trump says some garbage, they finesse it. I'm not, when it comes to Democratic leadership, I'm not saying all Democrats. In modern politics, I've rarely seen such a disconnect where they almost hold their own base in contempt. They're like, shut up. No. How dare you? Just be quiet. You want me or Trump? And that's pretty much what it boils down to. It's us or Trump. All right. And that's kind of, I got the one semblance of his word salads that I got is, how dare you compare? It's not even close between us and Trump and Republicans. And that's kind of what I've seen for the past 10 years or not. Well, are you going to vote for us or Trump? Idiot. You're going to vote for us. I don't think it works or not.
Yeah.
I don't think it's worked since 2016, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, look, first thing I will say is that, yes, it is absolutely correct that not all Democrats are standing with and for the people and for truth, justice, and the American way, to borrow a Supermanism. But it is also true that the only politicians who are Democrats. So those two things are true. Not all Democrats are doing it, and the only politicians who are doing it are Democrats. And we need to live inside of that complexity and understand that what we need are Democrats who are worthy of the title and the name, who actually believe that the purpose of getting elected is to enact an agenda,
Mm.
not to get elected in order to get reelected. And basically, I guess if I can be generous, a lot of the reactionary centrist advice that is what gets peddled out to a lot of these folks, and not all of them follow it because some of them are, in fact, guided by their morals and their convictions and their courage. What it amounts to is don't make the argument. That is what the whole thing boils down to. Don't make the argument on abortion. Pre-Dobbs, pre-Kansas referendum, it was call it the A word. We need a very big tent and we don't need to go in there. Don't make the argument on immigrant rights. Don't make the argument on racial justice. And somehow don't make the argument is going to advance the cause. But then the question is, what is the cause other than electing you in order to reelect you, which to me is not the purpose of politics. To me, the purpose of politics is to enact an agenda. And the right understands that. Their purpose in politics is to enact an agenda. And so I think, that's just a fundamental difference among, again, not all Democrats. And I think we know the ones who we respect and admire and like. And it is possible, we have seen, to have the kind of Democrats that are actually worthy of the name and worthy of our votes and worthy of our time and our attention. And we need to elect more of those. But here's the big but. Just as we rightly, when Democrats say very silly things, they say it less often, but they used to do this very often, where they'd be like, we just need our Republican colleagues to hop on board. And, we would do the whole Lucy with the football meme, you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about,
I
and
know
be like,
exactly what you're talking about.
how absurd are you? You're so ridiculous. In a certain sense, we're guilty of the same thing because we just keep asking Democrats to behave differently. And as silly as it is, when we see Democrats asking Republicans to behave differently, I also think some introspection is in order of us and a recognition that in successful movements away from authoritarianism, it has historically not been the opposition party in the lead. It has been, in cases where we have success, nonviolent, sustained, direct action.
So I mean, I was with you, and I was like, okay, it's basically what you're saying. It's the majority. It's going to be the people that push the Democrats. And what I've seen for the past 10 years or not is I don't think this Democratic Party in its current form, and like I said, it's not the all Democrats. I want to be fair. In its current form, this establishment, it seems that it wants restoration, not transformation. And essentially, it reminds me of it's more comfortable with the James Carville and Tim Millers of the Bulwark than it is with its own base. And James Carville, if you recall, a couple of months ago, he said, just play possum, play dead. So play possum, play dead. And they're seeing now, I've seen the strategy in real time. Ken Martin, the head of the DNC, was promising the release of the audit. And he said, "Oh, we're winning elections. We don't have to stand for anything. We don't have to do an audit. We don't have to change anything. Great. Let's just spike the football. They're going to vote for us anyway." And my fear on that is, and I've said this before, is they're going to do it just like they've done in 2016, 2020, 2024, business as usual. Don't change anything. The system works well for us. We're going to win. And then my fear on that is, again, I don't know, but what's going to happen. But if they win, say in 2026, 2028, business as usual, by 2032, we might get our first America First Nazi president. Because I see Steve Bannon and Candace Owens and a few others, and I take them seriously. they're outflanking Democrats. They're going further to the left on certain issues. For example, on APAC, for example, on AI, for example, against the elite, even though it's BS, but nonetheless. And I think what they're going to do is pick up the pieces, the fragments of a very disaffected, angry, pissed off majority that says, you know what? The institution sucks. The elites suck. Epstein sucks. All of this sucks, which is exactly why, I mean, my brain, I want to like bash my head against the wall someday. That's why Donald Trump won. They're like, all right, wrecking ball, sure, we'll give him a shot. Bernie, Democratic Socialist, why not? All right. The same people who voted for Donald Trump in 2024 also voted for AOC. And then you see Mamdani. I don't know, Anat. I'm looking at the polls. Seems to me, might as well ride this guy. He's on to something. And then the Democratic establishment went all in against Mamdani. And even now, Donald Trump, because he plays to the crowd, he says, all right, everyone loves this guy. Let me literally just give him verbal fellatio in the White House. And you still don't have Schumer, Gillibrand, and Hakeem Jeffries publicly embracing him. That to me shows a massive disconnect between where the Democrats, the majority is, and where the party is. But how do we bridge it when Donald Trump is so bad that the establishment is like, oh, he's destroying the country. We can play possum and get power again. Like, it's not in their interest to take any risks. And if we go back to abolish ICE, the reason why they're not taking this risk is, I'm sure you've seen this also, they're adopting the right-wing framework. Defund the police. That didn't work for us, so we won't take any risk whatsoever.
Yeah. Here's what I would say. What I would say is that you're absolutely right that the way I look at it, we have an economic problem masquerading as a political problem.
Mm.
Unless and until we actually contend with the fact that, hi, you're right, there is a minority that is destroying America, and that minority is billionaires. Or as I like to tell people, yeah, you're right. Someone did take your job. Someone did take your pension. Someone did take your ability to work one job and take the kids to Disney, even on a car, if it's a car trip. If you'd like to know who took all your money, it's the people with all the money. And if they can talk you into thinking it's anyone else, they are going to keep screwing you over. That is the reality of authoritarianism the world over. They literally have one song that they sing, which is, you want to know why your life sucks? It's because of those people. And you can fill in that blank with different permutations of who those people are. Recently, a very, very far right party, even to the right of reform in the UK, put out on social media, having a British passport doesn't make you British. It's like, you might want to look in a dictionary. Literally, that is what that's literally it. And also, if you wanted to live in a white utopia, you did. You could have gone and not like fucked over the world and forced people to come to you and happily continued eating your boiled chicken and weird porridge. But you're the reason why people have come into what is now Great Britain. But I digress. My point is just that this is the story that they tell everywhere, right? And so I think that, yes, of course, has to be better Democrats and they have to act with more muscularity. And some of them do, some of them at the state level do. We can point to our heroes. But ultimately, we need to understand that this problem is never going to go away if we only view it through the lens of what I call electoralism,
Mm.
which is that the tool in our tool belt is elected officials, instead of the tool in our tool belt is what's going on, as we know, in the Twin Cities, what's going on in Springfield, Ohio, what Livingston, Maine, what San Diego is pulling together, what's happening here in the Bay, what's happening with Free DC. And if I'm leaving someone out, it's not intentional. The inflatable frogs in Portland. The way that we actually contend with an authoritarian force is to be ungovernable. And
Mm.
that is not a, ask Democrats for this or ask Democrats for that. The Montgomery bus boycott was not ask Democrats for. The ACT UP breaking into the New York Stock Exchange and doing a die-in was not ask Democrats for. women's suffrage, going to prison for 6 months, doing hunger strike was not a ask elected leaders for. So I'm not saying there is no role to play in the electoralism lane. Absolutely, we need to win these midterms. But we're kidding ourselves if we think that this is the main tool that we should be exercising. And there exists in authoritarianism a concept that's known as the loyal opposition.
Mm,
Opposition parties are they're of integral importance to authoritarianism because they are what allow them to maintain the pretext of democratic practice. There are opposition parties in Russia. What that means is that you get to say, of course, there's a democracy. There's another party. Of
mm,
course, there is a democracy. There's an election. And that when that opposition party is so wedded to the preservation of the status quo and the way we've always done things and not busting the filibuster in order to actually pass freedom to vote when we had the trifecta, not codifying Roe v. Wade, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then they actually become, I'll be generous and say, unwitting servants to the project of authoritarianism because that is what the status quo is upholding. And so I think it's incumbent upon us, yes, to pressure Democrats, yes, to do our 5 phone calls, 100% to vote, but to also recognize that these are economic levers of power that
mm.
all of these folks are beholden to because it's very expensive to become an elected official in the United States, which is gross and shouldn't be. But the only way we're going to have the kind of elected officials that we actually deserve is by contending for power. And the only durable way to contend for power is by increasing the labor movement extraordinarily, having way, way, way more concentrated worker power to overtake capital, to use our consumer power. That's where we need to be focusing our energy and attention.
So focus on the grassroots, use our numbers, use basically what we want to be accomplished, and then push the Democrats because, as we've seen for the past 10 years, this current model of the Democratic Party, not all Democrats, has not evolved to meet the moment, right? Their North Star, sadly, is not their own base. It is the money, the corporate money, what's safe. And they're surrounded by, unfortunately, not enough Anats. They're surrounded by, it seems like a lot of corporate consultants who say, don't rock the boat. We're still sucking at the teat of this donor and this donor. Okay, let's play it safe and let's just amble into power. We don't have to stand for anything. We could just get power for the sake of power. But can you explain to many people, because if they don't understand, right? Just because maybe it might be as simple as money. I don't know, Anat. But many people are like, I don't, because they ask me all the time, I don't get it. Schumer sees the polls. They hate him. Hakeem Jeffries sees the poll. No one trusts him. People want fighters. They don't fight. People want some strength. They don't show strength. People are saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't, especially Dems, hey, maybe we shouldn't support, I don't know, a genocide or a war criminal Netanyahu. And Schumer 2 weeks ago says, my primary job, my role as a Democratic leader is to keep sending funding, Israel. Hakeem Jeffries literally saw APEC spend $2 million to knock out Tom Malinowski, which then elected, chef's kiss. Well, not elected, but the Democratic candidate is going to be Representative Mejia, a progressive organizer, which is just amazing, right? And he still says, I'm going to embrace APAC. So they're saying, I don't understand. Do they not care? Do they not see? Do they not care to see? Do they think we're wrong? Is there a greater strategy afoot that they're not willing to communicate with us? Can you please explain why they behave this way, which is so antithetical to the wishes literally of their base, especially when they see the polls? Because people really don't get it, Anna.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are several explanations. One explanation is that it's undeniable. I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation if it were deniable that there is a group of people in this country, it's probably around give take 30%, that are interested in this MAGA agenda, this project of government for landed white men. And whether they explicitly realize that or not, they're into it. And they're into it sometimes because they're the beneficiaries of it, but sometimes because of, what LBJ said. If you can make the poorest white man feel superior to someone else, he not only will, vote for you and bring you into power, he will like empty his pockets to you. And so there's like this politics of anger, of resentment, of keeping their base engaged and enraged is real. So you look at that, and if you have a very unsophisticated understanding of public opinion research and you are, drinking at the poison teat of what I've come to call pollingism, you're like, okay, Americans want mass deportation. Americans want, an end to wokeism. Americans want filling restrictions on, Americans want, because there are Americans who want that. And I would be lying to you if I said 0% of Americans want that. Again, we would not be in this mess if 0% wanted that. And so when you observe that, you can either take a cold, hard look at it and say, okay, that is because there is a calcified core that wants that. They are the minority. And the reason why they managed to somehow eke out power is partly out of propaganda, it's partly out of lies, and it's partly out of the fact that the other side, presumably the other political party, because we have a two-party system for all intents and purposes, doesn't make the counter argument. Instead of looking around and saying, actually, it turns out Americans are of mixed minds. And throughout all of 2024, in the exact same survey, New York Times, Siena, Ipsos, YouGov, whatever, in the exact same survey where they would ask, do you want mass deportation? They would also ask, do you want a pathway to citizenship? And more people would say yes to the latter in the same survey. We're talking about the same sample, the same dates, the same methodology, but the media would only report on the answer to the mass deportation thing. So when that's what you're sort of swimming in, you're like, oh, I guess this is what the majority want, not realizing that A, your job is to enact an agenda. It's not to simply follow what the majority want. And B, it's not actually what the majority wants. The devil is in the details, and it depends how you ask the question. So part of the answer is that they are receiving continuous, very bad advice. It is absolutely possible to use randomized control trial testing to produce the idea that people don't want hyperbolic discourse. People want a middle of the road thing. But in reality, what social science shows is that there actually is not a middle. There is a set of people that I call the good point people, because you ask them.
The good point?
Yes, because they're like this. Good point. Yeah, good point. But also, good point. Same survey, you ask them, agree, disagree. Immigrants contribute to our culture and community. We're all the better for having them here. 65% of them, 70% of them say yes. Immigrants are problematic and they create a drain on our resources. Same percentage of them say yes, more or less. You can do that with abortion. You can do that with LGBTQ. They basically, whatever they are told is common sense and the way the world works, they are very strongly susceptible to what we call in psychology anchor bias. So whatever is kind of presented as a proposition to them, yes, good point. So what gets repeated over and over and over again is what is true about the world and what everyone believes. They're not truly middle of the road, because that would imply that they have a fixed position and a fixed ideology. And that's simply, the data don't support that. And so instead, and thank you for letting me give this nerdy an explanation.
I love
Everyone
it. No,
seems okay.
keep cooking.
Deep nerd. We should have done a deep
This is
nerd
a safe
warning.
space for deep nerd.
Deep nerd.
Deep space nerd 9.
Yeah. In my defense, I feel like the question you asked me called for deep nerd.
Yeah, it was.
So the answer is that It depends how you ask questions. It depends how you answer, you read the results. They can produce data that tells them this is what Americans want. But I can produce you equal volumes of, I would argue, much, much more comprehensive and well-structured and well-defended data that shows that when you actually explain to people what I did, if you want to know who took your money, it's the people with all the money. Immigrants are awesome. If you actually make the argument, I mean, this is what the ugly, bitter irony of this is. What this reactionary centrism has done over the last, 20 years is make the electorate more susceptible to right-wing lies
Yep.
because they have refused to actually argue the other side. When you vacate the field and you don't forthrightly say, this is why abortion is absolutely integral to people's basic autonomy and their ability to live their lives in any meaningful way. When you just say, we're just not going to talk about it. And when you don't say, this is why immigrants are awesome, this is why we are all the better for having them here, they make my life better, your life better, here's why, you vacate the rhetorical field. And now the only thing that people are hearing is the unrelenting hatred, the lies, the division, the fear, and that is just allowed to proliferate. So again, I'm not claiming there is no one in America who believes these bad, terrible things. There absolutely is. But the way that we deal with that is by actually making an argument about what is true. And so part of it is, yes, that they receive bad advice, that bad advice has, point estimates with margins of error. It has numbers with decimal points given to them by dudes who got 800 on their math SATs. So that must be right. Part of it is because, and like we're going a deeper layer of nerd, they believe in a system that is called wins above replacement. You may have heard of this. It's called war, where each race, each congressional race, for example, is understood to be a rhetorical island where you figure out what's going to work for, Jared Golden here and what's going to work for AOC there and what's going to work for, Mary Patola in, whatever, that like somehow what's being said over here in Kentucky and what's being said over here in New York and what's being said over here in Florida doesn't actually add up to anything bigger. And when you think about the overarching advice that is given, try to wrap your brain around this. The overarching advice given to Democrats is espouse heterodox positions
Yep.
that go against the party. So I have to ask, if Bob and Sue and Juan and Jerry and Joaquin and so on are all espousing heterodox positions that go against the party, then what is the party position?
What do
There
you
is no
stand for?
right. And eventually you can't even follow that advice because if everyone's supposed to be following the advice that they don't support the party position, then by definition, there is no party position. All of this rests inside of the fiction that what people believe about Democrats is made out of what Democrats say, which is the deep irony, right? Even for everything that these quote unquote Democratic leaders are saying, they still get accused of being, Antifa, kombucha swilling, ICE hating. Chuck Schumer is
Marxist,
supposedly
Muslim, LGBTIA plus converters of their children, radicals who eat children.
right, because what MAGA understands is that the vast majority of US eligible voters, actual voters and people who could but don't always, that they're low information. I mean, this is what breaks my brain. When they present this data and evidence, whatever, we need to say this and we need to say that. And this is the way we win in this district. And this is the way we win in this district. And this is what we win in this district. I'm like, are you truly making believe that the US voter is following every race or even their own local races when we know they can't name their member of Congress? Like, You know that people are low information and that they make these decisions on the basis of highly impressionistic sort of vibes,
Yep.
and that they can't follow into the details because, by the way, just to survive, they need to work multiple jobs of every single one of these things. And so if you don't have an overarching repeated refrain that breaks the signal through the noise. Why did we notice Portland? Because there were inflatable frogs. Why did we notice Minnesota? Of course, because of the horrific murders that occurred there and elsewhere. Those were obviously not the first. And, I think we can all be honest enough, as horrific as it is to admit, they're not going to be the last. But it's also because of the heroes. It's also because people in communities showed themselves, they made themselves the protagonists of their own story. And so I don't know that I fully answered, but
No,
yeah,
you
it's a
did.
combination.
I think you know what it's comforting for me in the most painful ways because you did the deep nerd dive analysis, and it coincides with my layman observations, which is they, meaning the Democratic Party right now, the advice they're getting is it is better to cede the ground, not fight for anything. By ceding the ground, the right wing, as we have seen, moves the Overton window further and further to the right. No matter what Democrats do, they'll still be seen as flaming leftist, Marxist, Muslims. So they still haven't learned, but they think, okay, we should be Republican light and we should give them Timu Republican, which nobody wants on immigration, on taxing the billionaires, on APAC, on support for Israel and support for crime. And that way, we won't be seen as far left, which is the completely fictitious and unfair framing of the actual far right movement. But maybe, just maybe, if we played moderate and bear hug Liz Cheney, then these alleged centrists who exist like unicorns will embrace us. And maybe we can move to the right, and our base is going to come along anyway. It didn't work in 2016. It didn't work in 2020. It's not working in 2024. And then, going to your point, I think it makes perfect sense how you get a Cuellar or a Golden or a Swayze or all these other people. They're like, well, Mamdani's just New York. It won't translate. We need an Alyssa Slotkin. AOC can't translate, even though she crushed it in Munich. People don't know what the words oligarchy. We need a Henry Cuellar who's anti-abortion and who'll vote literally for Save ID and who'll vote for funding ICE even after ICE killed Renee Nicole Good. We need them. And the rest of us are saying, maybe not. Maybe you need a more AOC or maybe you need more of a Mejia, right? And the interesting thing is, based on what you're saying, and I'm trying to understand how the Democrats work, based on pollingism, they see the numbers and the latest numbers that have come out on that are 47-46 for the first time ever. 47% of Americans of plurality are for abolishing ICE. 60% to 65% are disfavor ICE. So based on everything you said, based on pollingism, I'm very curious, where would the numbers have to be for the Democratic Party to say, you know what? I think it's safe. We can come out and insert your verb, dismantle, abolish, remove, and replace ICE. The water is warm here. Would it have to be 60-40, 65-30? Because I think it was a fantastic breakdown and it put into academic nerdy sense what all of us have felt. And we've seen the frustration in that they keep losing, they don't win, but they're unwilling to break from this model. And I don't think we can break from this model. So if they are just wedded to this model, according to pollingism, what do the numbers have to be for them to then meet their base?
Well, I hate to tell you, but motivated cognition is a hell of a drug. And you can make anything that you need to be true, true. So the way I'll answer back to you is, what are the numbers on support for abortion? What are the numbers on support for comprehensive gun reform? What are the numbers on, let's just take something super, super simple, like a $15 an hour minimum wage? And these are all positions that, for the most part,
60,
Democrats,
70?
yeah,
70?
I mean, there are elements of gun reform that are in the 90s and are in the 60s with gun owners, 70s with gun owners. It depends on the sort of specific policy. And, true, absolutely, credit where due, like Democrats largely support these things. But there's a huge difference between supporting things and going to the wall
Mm,
and actually saying, I will die on this hill. I will stop traffic for this. I will not allow a single bill to be considered. I will not give cloture. I will sit down on the floor of this chamber. And not to mention, of course, 2020 to 2022, when like they weren't willing to bust the filibuster.
mm,
So even when things have like super majority support, that doesn't actually necessarily mean that Democrats will sort of ride hard enough to do them. Because again, not all of them, but for a lot of them, the name of the game is getting elected in order to be reelected. And the way that you get reelected in US politics is because people are low information, having a certain amount of name recognition, having a certain amount of advertising that just sort of keeps your name in the ether. Because for lots of people, it's kind of like, well, I don't really know what's going on, so this is who I'm going to pick. And so it does, as you noted, boil down to money a
mm,
lot of the time. But this is where, this is where, and I keep coming back to this, like, I also don't want us to have a fetish around polls. If getting children out of concentration camps was polling at 2%, I would still be yelling and screaming that that 100% is what we need to do. I don't care.
mm.
And obviously, that's not where it's polling. It's extraordinarily popular. It's even more popular than anything having to do with ICE. I also don't care where ICE is polling. And that's because it is our job to mobilize the people who understand what is right and correct and needs to occur, and to get them to persuade other people.
Yeah.
Because, as I said before, the majority of people are these good point people. When we do really comprehensive looks, and this is true not just within the United States, but in other countries where we work, it generally, more or less, depends on the issue, breaks down to 20, 60, 20. 20% of people are diehard left wing. You can lecture me to the end of all time, lock me in a room hostage with only Fox News playing. I'm never going to hate immigrants. There's nothing you can do that's going to make me hate immigrants. There's nothing you can do that's going to make me anti-union. There's nothing that you can do that's going to make me believe the flat tax is a good idea. I'm unpersuadable. I suspect you are unpersuadable in a similar way. Just as there are people like us, there are people like that on the right. They will never be moved. They won't be. And then the vast majority of people are these good point people. They are misnamed middle of the road moderate, but what they actually are is truly and deeply conflicted.
Mm.
And so the question is, how do you contend with people who are truly deeply conflicted? Do you say, well, they don't already support our thing, so we probably should never talk about our thing? Or do you say, oh, all right, roll up these folks are up for grabs. Let's make the argument. Because when you make the argument, that is what has people see you as a leader. I don't think it's going to surprise you to hear that when we do focus groups, which we have been doing, I think we're like now at 280, 290 since the outset of 2021. We're doing them constantly. One of the number one things people say about Democrats that they actually respect and admire, it's almost always the same. It's, I don't always agree with her. I don't always agree with him. I don't always agree with them. But I got to hand it to them. I know what they stand for and they clearly believe in it. And they sound like a person. Those are the two things that people get lauded for. It's not, I agree with everything she's saying. I agree with everything he's saying. They say they seem to have convictions, they seem to actually believe in them, they seem to actually want to get something done, and they sound like a person. Those
Mamdani.
are the
Mamdani.
Mamdani, AOC, um, Pritzker at times. I mean, it depends how high or low information the group is. There's not a ton of people breaking through. But yeah, and the other thing about Mamdani, just to take that as a specific case study, and this is the other thing that is just mind-boggling to me. If you're in a campaign, you have to understand that by definition, the opposition is going to attack you. That's how a campaign works, especially when your opposition is MAGA. They are going to attack you. So, one of the things that you want to select as part of your messaging strategy in a campaign is, what would I like to be attacked for? Because the I don't want to be attacked for anything is not an option. Take that off the table. Not going to happen. And so what Mamdani chose, and what many successful candidates choose, Zach Polanski right now in the UK, if you've taken a look at him, is, I want to be attacked for wanting to take money away from rich people and give it to everyone else. And if you remember early on in the Kamala Harris campaign, she suggested ending price gouging. She suggested raising the capital gains tax. She suggested, doing away with childhood poverty. And when she made that price gouging proposal, she was attacked, a very short-lived attack, on wanting central planning. She wants to control our prices. Try to imagine if the entirety of that campaign, they kept attacking her. This woman wants to control your prices. She wants to hold down your prices. Instead of being attacked for being soft on this and, weak on that. And so
Help
that's
you.
part of it. It would help you.
She'd be like, yes, yes, I am for the rich to pay their taxes, and I want you to have an affordable life. Guilty. Guilty as charged. You got me.
Yeah. But instead, what they're trying to do is, please all, and therefore they end up pleasing none. They want to try to find this sort of milquetoast middle. Part of the other problem with what they do is, oftentimes they will measure public opinion in the aggregate, which includes in the sample that die-hard set of people, whether it's 20% or 30%, who it doesn't matter what they ever say, are never going to agree with them. And so inside of a survey in the abstract, they're like, if a person were to say this milk toasty non thing about, we need a balanced approach in which we have law enforcement and we have control over our border and enforcement of this and enforcement of that, but also maybe we stop murdering people occasionally and then people can't wear masks, people are like, yeah, that sounds good. But they're measuring the public opinion of everyone, including, like I said, people who will never support them or vote for them, and taking the scoring of that group of people as being as important as the scoring of their base and the conflicted. And that also just sort of perverts the entire numerical exercise.
And it moves the conversation further and further to the right, and moves the Overton window to the right, and then
Right.
shifts the center, not to the center, but to actually the right. And then, I'm sure, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but it's so interesting that I've never heard a Republican, especially in the past 10 years, shy away from the term conservative or MAGA or right wing. They own it. I've had Democratic consultants and strategists tell me on this show, that's a left wing position. Oh, it's just the leftists, in a very derisive tone. Like, I'm talking about in 2026. And you see
Yeah.
Democrats themselves say, no, we're not progressive. Oh, it's just the left. And I'm like, this is so fascinating. You see the left as a pejorative. You see the progressive as a pejorative, and you are a Democrat. I have never seen, whether it's a moderate conservative, whatever that means, I don't think they exist anymore, ever run away from these labels. And by doing that, it goes back to your point, you're ceding the ground to bad faith talking points to an extremist party that has shifted the center so far to the right. And you are now chasing, based on pollingism, which you just described very beautifully. Thank you so much for the deep nerd dive, to this mythical unicorn that you will never ever reach, because they'll always, always, always see you as leftist, flaming, Marxist, godless heathens who are Timu Republicans at best, and abandoning your base, right? But I want to ask you this, because I get told, now, Waj, We need a Henry Cuellar. We need a Jared Golden. We need it. No, no, no. This is what we need, and we have to just go for all the quadrants, and it's better to have them than people who, I don't know, would support abortion rights or maybe, fight against voter suppression or maybe, I don't know, get bribed by foreign individuals and they get pardoned by Donald Trump. I'm talking about Henry Cuellar. Your response to those Democrats that say that's what we need, it's a big tent, and we need the Cuellars instead of the Mejias.
Yeah, what I would say to that is that we do need a big tent, and in order for a big tent to remain standing, it needs a pole, by which I mean a backbone. Otherwise, it's simply a tarp that smothers you.
Mm.
And what we have seen in successful movements to exit authoritarianism, which is where we are and the reality that we need to confront, is that yes, people are right. We do need to make a very big we. We need the base and enough of the conflicted to be in not just voting, but also continuous nonviolent direct resistance. And I'm going to keep hammering that because voting is not the only tool in this belt.
Absolutely.
And so, what is that big tent made out of? Is it made out of the abrogation of our values, the absence of standing for anything, the absence of having an agenda? My answer back to that is then what is the purpose of electing you? I'm not electing you in order to have your nameplate next to a door. I don't care. I'm not electing you in order to make arbitrary numbers. I'm electing you because there is a set of things that I want to see done in the world. And so the question is, how do we get the set of things done in the world? And unless and until we have a set of standards and we are willing, as I keep saying, to actually make the argument, which, by the way, you can do in Texas and you can do in Kentucky and you can do in Nebraska and you can do in Idaho. It's not easy. But if you look at a state like Minnesota, there's a reason why Minnesota never had its Michigan Rick Snyder moment or its Wisconsin, Tommy Thompson. And then, oh my gosh, I can't believe his name just flew out of my brain. The other horrific governor. Someone help me out. The more recent one.
Scott, what's his name?
Scott Walker.
Scott
Scott
Walker.
Walker. I'm from Wisconsin. Very embarrassing. So, or maybe my brain, maybe
No,
that
your
was my
brain
brain
healed
doing me
yourself.
a
It protected
favor.
you.
Right. It's true. We'll call it that. We'll call it that. So there's a reason why Minnesota didn't fall in 2016 in the way that these other states did, and didn't previous to that have quote unquote, right to work anti-union laws in place. And it's because, and I know because I've worked there for almost 10 years, they have always made the argument. Now, have they done it perfectly? Is it a utopia? Are there no problems with like racism and sex? No, of course not. It's still like a state in the United States, in the world, in this year of 2026. No place is the perfect place, obviously. But when the Somali American population, Somali immigrants, and then, US citizens for many generations were being vilified, rather than be like, okay, we just won't talk about it. Okay, we just will pretend like we have nothing to do with that. The community there, look it up. It's incredible. In
Yep.
2018, as the kickoff of the election, hosted a many tens of thousands of person celebration of Eid al-Fitr in Viking Stadium, which they nicknamed Super Eid. It was Eid is for everyone. They organized on behalf of race, on behalf of class, on behalf of gender, and they didn't try this let's just not talk about it. And so what I would say is that yes, we need a Democratic majority, but we need a Democratic majority that instills and implements a Democratic agenda. Otherwise, it's a Democratic majority for the purposes of nameplates, and that isn't much. And so, yeah, that's my answer.
No, that's a great answer. And speaking of Eid, folks, Ramadan starting in 2 days, so I will be fasting. So there will be no water here, not even water, not even water. But it shows Minnesota is a fantastic example. Even with the slim majority, they stood for something and they won, and they implemented progressive policies that have actually helped The people. People are persuadable. People can be shifted. People can be moved with a powerful message that is repeated. And based on what we've learned also from Anat, who's done all the work and the polling, you have said that people seem to be responding to someone who actually fights for something, has a plan. They might not agree with the entire plan, but like, oh, that person has a plan for something. I agree with 60% of it. Maybe not 40%, but at least that person has a plan. They're willing to fight for it. And oh, they're willing to communicate it with what looks like authenticity and sincerity. They actually believe this shit. That seems to, oh, I don't know, move people, according to the polls. What doesn't work is this wishy-washy word salad constructed by AI and ChatGPT that seeks to please everyone and pleases no one. A final question for you now before I let you go, and thank you. It was a bonus-sized issue. I wanted to keep you for 40 minutes. I kept you almost for an hour. Um, if Democrats are listening, and I don't know if any Democrat will come back and talk to me now after that, because I have heard Hakeem Jeffries was very upset. Um, your advice to Democrats uh, going to 2026 and 2028 when it comes to winning the majority and when it comes to messaging?
Yeah, my advice to them is the same as my advice to everybody listening, which is a message nobody hears cannot persuade them. If you want to break a signal through the noise, then you have to give them something to talk about. Now, one could argue that you just gave an example of giving someone something to talk about, but not in a good way, meaning people talking about that interview, which is obviously not ideal if, you're trying to convince people that you're a leader. But what it means is that you have to actually catch people's attention by being honest with them about what is going on and presenting a proactive, forthright plan to fix it.
That's right.
And it's funny because you actually offered this in your interview. You said, okay, you're not in power, but why not say, I've been saying to people, because I also do a lot of work on perceptions of the election and how we talk about the election itself, because of course, spoiler alert, a political party tries to court your vote, an authoritarian regime tries to keep you from voting, as we know they want to do, that your vote is your ice whistle. Your vote is your
Mm.
healthcare dollar. Your vote is a kid out of a concentration camp. Your vote is basically an end to this regime, as I keep saying, of the bullies for the billionaires. So my advice to Democrats is to say no money for murder, no funding for fascism, no payouts for pedophiles when they are talking about anything related to, DHS and funding beyond that, to be bold enough to actually catch somebody's notice, to say fewer things and say them more often, and to make the stakes absolutely clear to people. And in that, to be clear, if you elect me, if you give us the majority, this is what we will actually do. This is how we will confront this regime. This is who we will impeach. This is who we will prosecute. And if they are found guilty, this is who we will imprison. That's what people want.
Affordability, accountability, fighters, stand for something, give us specifics. You know, I'll end with this is I interviewed Zoran almost a year ago, and he was a distant number two, Anat. And this was a dude who about a year and a half ago, if you recall, folks, filmed videos of himself trying to talk to people on the street and no one would talk to him. He was a distant number two a year ago. People thought there's no way this guy, Zoran Mamdani, can beat Andrew Cuomo, who's an establishment man. Everyone knows him. And Zoran, he said, this is what I stand for. This is what I say about billionaires. This is what I say about affordability. This is what I say about what's happening in Israel. This is what I say about ICE and immigrants. Whether I win or lose, I stand on this. And lo and behold, Anna, this dude wins by nearly double digits. And right now, last time I checked, is the most popular, one of the most popular Democrats. His popularity has gone up after being elected. I think there are many things about his campaign that can be replicable. However, the DNC has tried everything to destroy him. So I think what we have to do, people, is push. We have the numbers. We have to push them. And I see some of them now shifting. I saw Abigail Spanberger. She saw where the wind was blowing. She shifted. Mikey Sherrill shifted. I see Ro Khanna shifting, folks. You're seeing this shift happening in real time within 1 year. They're politicians. Not all of them are dumb. So it's our job to push, push, push. It's our job to remind them that they need our votes. And it's our job to be ungovernable and make them uncomfortable. Fantastic hour. Thank you, Anat, for doing the deep dive, nerd dive. We love the nerd dives here. Can you shamelessly promote yourself?
Um, Not my favorite thing to do, but I appreciate it. So I have an old school podcast, like the kind that people used to have, all audio, where each episode is about a campaign we won somewhere in the world. One of those from season one is actually about Minnesota and the Greater Than Fear campaign and how they came to construct a multiracial, pro-democracy, unapologetic movement that got them the, one vote majority with which they passed a whole slew of progressive legislation. That's called Words to Win By, and it's in the places a person listens to podcasts. And then I have a Substack by the same name, Words to Win By. Yeah, and sometimes I rant on Blue Sky under the name at Anatosaurus, because that's the name of a dinosaur, and to me, it sort of sounds like Anat Shenker-Osorio.
When the first time we talked, I'm like, Anatosaurus, that's a great name for a dinosaur. And you're like, it was deliberate. I'm like, yes. I just put in the link to Words to Win By, the Substack, the pod. I also put in a link to uh, ASO Communications, correct?
Yes, and all the work that we do is intentionally open source. We are trying to work ourselves out of a job. So if you go on there, you will see messaging guides for all of the things that have been tested and constructed. You will see ads. So if you want talking points on, whatever it is, education, climate change, immigrant rights, etc., it's there.
Wait. I'm putting up the link here. I will link to it once this is up. And yes, sadly, this is probably why we get along because both of us are terrible capitalists. Like
Terrible.
you give everything for free. The left hook, there's no paywalls on anything. We're completely, if you will, funded, subsidized by kind people. If you have no money, I get it. Just become a subscriber. Everything's free. If you do have some money, if I may, I have a special. It is going on for the month of February. It's a 25% off special. It's $3.75 forever, folks, forever. So if you sign up, it's $3.75 a month forever. theleftook.substack.com/special. It goes a very long way. I have 800 kids and 3 cats, but if you have no money, it is okay. Just subscribe and share this. There's about 1,700 people watching, which is fantastic for this deep dive, nerdy conversation during the afternoon. I know a lot of people tune in the second half. I'm talking to Anat Shenker-Osorio. She actually does the work, the polling, the studies. She knows this, all the stats, the data-driven nerd talk, and she's making the case for, standing for something, going 10 toes down, being sincere and fighting. And if Democrats do, not only will they implement better policies that'll help all of us, folks, they'll win. They will actually win. Thank you, Anat. We'll have this conversation up for anyone who missed it on my Substack and the Anat Substack later today. Until next time, be kind, be informed, and please, oh please, don't be a fascist. And if we haven't bored you, come back in 10 minutes. 3:15, Qasim Rashid's going to join us. Thank you, Anat.
Thank you.